Suarez in London, and this is CNN.
Traders warned me on Friday this would be a breakout moment, and how. The S&P closes at an all-time high as the closing bell rings on Wall Street. It's Monday, August the 27th. Tonight, a rewrite, a rebranding, or a revolution? Donald Trump makes a NAFTA deal with Mexico. Yeah, that's not possible, in case you were wondering. Stock markets are rolling to record highs. I'll be talking to Anthony Scaramucci about that feel-good factor on Wall Street. And Warren Buffett makes a bet on India for the very first time. We'll tell you why. I'm Paula Newton, and this is Questions Business. Okay, I know I say buckle up often, but no, really today I mean it. U.S. stocks have rallied after President Trump promised to terminate, we'll talk about that later, the NAFTA trade deal and enter a new deal which leaves Canada out in the cold. It's cold there already. The 16-year agreement with Mexico will be sent to Congress for approval. That is key here. In it, there are clauses about auto manufacturing and higher labor standards. The president says the new agreement won't be known as NAFTA anymore, and it's not even certain if Canada will even be part of it.
I like to call this deal the United States-Mexico Trade Agreement. I think it's an elegant name. I think NAFTA has a lot of bad connotations for the United States because it was a ripoff. It was a deal that was a horrible deal for our country. And I think it's got a lot of bad connotations to a lot of people. And so we will probably, you and I will agree to the name. We will see whether or not we decide to put up Canada or just do a separate deal with Canada if they want to make the deal. The simplest deal is more or less already made. It'd be very easy to do and execute.
Okay, CNN Español's Gabriela Frias is at CNN Center, and Jeremy Diamond is at the White House. Jeremy, first to you. That was quite a scene in the Oval Office. He brought up Peña Nieto, the current Mexican president, live on the phone to talk about this deal. I want to understand from you, what did White House officials say about the details and whether or not NAFTA, as we know it, is actually dead?
Yeah, well, it was a made-for-TV moment in the way that only President Trump can execute it. And in that same vein, it was also very much not truthful in a lot of regards. The president saying, talking about the U.S.-Mexico trade agreement, there is no U.S.-Mexico trade agreement as far as a free trade deal is concerned between the United States and Mexico. And the president's own U.S. trade representative and his office said as much today when they put in multiple press releases that this agreement today was a preliminary agreement in principle between the United States and Mexico as the two countries work with Canada towards renegotiating NAFTA. The officials made clear today that the president does want to rename NAFTA, call it something else, but it is very clear as well that the United States and U.S. officials, including Robert Lighthizer, the trade representative, Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, are still pursuing a renegotiated NAFTA deal. In fact, they began these renegotiations with Canada today, is what they said, and they are still working towards that trilateral format. So as much as the president made it sound today like a U.S.-Mexico free trade deal is replacing NAFTA, that's really not the case. But there is a but here, and that is that U.S. officials also indicated that they are willing to do that. It's not happening right now, but said that they are willing to do a bilateral deal with Mexico. The sticking point there, however, there's no indication that Mexico is going to do a bilateral trade agreement. So far, they and Canadian officials have been quite clear that they want to maintain this trilateral format that exists under NAFTA, keeping this deal between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, not bilateral deals between the United States and these two key trading partners.
Yeah, and in the meantime, manufacturers in all three countries await the fallout from here. I mean, Gabriela Frias, I know that you've been speaking to Mexican officials. What do they say about the points, the finer points of this deal, and about Canada eventually being included in it?
That was one of the highlights, Paula, hello, of Minister Videgaray, the foreign minister of Mexico, earlier today during a press conference, and I'm going to quote his words. He said, "It's fundamental, it's a priority that Canada be part of the negotiation. Mexico will do what's necessary to keep this as trilateral agreement but there are things, he said, that we can control, including, he said, the relations between Canada and the U.S. So if this negotiation does not go through between the U.S. and Canada, of course, at least we, and he means Mexico, at least we know we have a trade deal. So for the Mexican government right now, the message is this is a good day for Mexico because we no longer have the uncertainty of a NAFTA deal dead, but at least we do have a trade deal with the United States. So that's how they are seeing it right now. A number of points have been made today, including 70%, 75% of a car content must be coming from Mexico or the U.S. 40 to 45% of a car production must be made by workers earning $16 an hour. By comparison, less than $8 an hour on average was what a worker made, Paula, on the assembly line in 2017, and this is according to the Center for Automotive Research. Also, tariffs on agricultural products remain at zero. No sunset provision. The deal would last 16 years with a revision in 6 years. But the Canada topic is the big question mark here for analysts, even though the government of Mexico is playing it right now as a very good day and insisting that Canada must be in this agreement.
And again, they believe they will be. Chrystia Freeland, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, heading to Washington very shortly to begin those talks again tomorrow. Jeremy, back to you. We saw a lot of unpredictable behavior from the president in just one day. I also want to let you know, perhaps you have it already, that the White House has now released a statement from the president, and this is in relation to Senator McCain. You can see that shot, live shot now, of the White House, the flag actually flying again at half-mast in order to memorialize Senator John McCain. This became a point of controversy today when on multiple occasions the president refused to really say anything about his passing. And on top of that, the flag had been raised earlier with little explanation. We now have some type of statement from the president. Jeremy, I don't know if you have it, but
yeah.
Okay, go for it, Jeremy, because I know that at this point it is a bit of a U-turn in terms of what he has said before.
Yeah, absolutely. And the president today was asked 5 separate times in person to comment on the late Senator John McCain, and he refused to do so each time, ignoring those shouted questions. But he has now put out a statement that the White House just released as a statement from the president, and it says, despite our differences on policy and politics, I respect Senator John McCain's service to our country, and in his honor have signed a proclamation to fly the flag of the United States at half-staff until the day of his interment. And that is why we have seen the flag that is flying above the White House now going back to half-staff just a few minutes ago, really. And the president also says in this statement that he has asked Vice President Mike Pence to address the ceremony honoring Senator McCain at the U.S. Capitol on Friday. We know, of course, from our previous reporting that the president We know, of course, from our previous reporting that the president was not invited to attend the funeral services of the senator.
Yeah, and given the kind of relationship they had, perhaps that's not surprising. Jeremy Diamond there at the White House. Our thanks to Gabriela Frias in Atlanta, both of you for bringing us up to date on, of course, that NAFTA story. Now, it's unclear if we're actually dealing with a revised NAFTA or the end of NAFTA entirely. The Mexican president referred to NAFTA several times during his speakerphone conversation with the media. President Trump seemed adamant, though, it was over and warned Canada could lose out.
We have an agreement where both with Canada and with Mexico, I will terminate the existing deal. When that happens, I can't quite tell you. It depends on what the timetable is with Congress, but I'll be terminating the existing deal and going into this deal. We'll start negotiating with Canada relatively soon. They want to negotiate very badly. But one way or the other, we have a deal with Canada. It'll either be a tariff on cars or it'll be a negotiated deal. And frankly, a tariff on cars is a much easier way to go, but perhaps the other would be much better for Canada.
Not much of a threat there. The former U.S. Commerce Secretary Carlos Gutierrez joins me now in the C-suite. Thanks so much for being here, especially on this kind of a day. When you see it on its surface, what does this deal mean to you? Do you think it's a good deal for both U.S. and Mexico, whether or not Canada's involved at all?
Well, you know, there are two issues that have been the real big factors. One has been the sunset clause, which means that every 5 years, NAFTA is up for discussion. That's been changed to 6 years. And if one of the three parties does not want to remain in NAFTA, then they can leave within 10 years or after 10 years. So that's part of the agreement. The part that I think is the most dangerous is the auto rules of origin, because we just don't know the impact. 75% content has to come from the U.S. or Mexico.
Those are the new rules.
That's the new rules. Used to be 62%. But the key thing is that 40 to 45% of the content needs to come from areas in Mexico where people make $16 an hour. I don't know where that is in Mexico. I don't know workers who make $16 an hour in Mexico. Now, let's say that that does happen. Even a car with $16 an hour labor coming from Mexico will still be less expensive than a U.S. car, than a car made in the U.S. So what we'll have potentially is inflation. We'll just have more expensive cars coming in from overseas, but they'll still come in. Now, that's a scenario, and that could well happen. I think that's the riskiest part, is the rules of origin.
And it's important to get to that because this was a huge hang-up in these negotiations. It's one of the reasons that the U.S. sat down with Mexico in isolation, because Donald Trump believes this will grow manufacturing jobs in the United States at the end of the day. Is there any arguing with that? And look, even Wilbur Ross is on the record saying, so it'll cost Americans a little bit more. Who cares?
I think it's still something you have to see. It hasn't been proven. So we want to bring manufacturing jobs back. We put a 25% tariff on steel, a 10% tariff on aluminum. Well, that makes building a plant in the U.S. more expensive. So how does that help bring manufacturing back? Part of the problem here has been connecting the dots. And how does this whole thing add up so that we do get more jobs coming back, new plants being built? And that's the part that we haven't seen yet.
And if we get to what has become bare-knuckle negotiations here, so we have a deal with Mexico in principle. As I was saying, Canadian officials say that Chrystia Freeland will be there to negotiate starting tomorrow to bring Canada in. There seems to be a gun to her head, though, because they are saying very clearly that they want this done in the next few weeks. Do you see a trilateral deal as possible? And I know, and I'm sure you're going to tell me there were lots of issues you would like to bring and did bring to Canada's attention when you were Commerce Secretary, because it's not all, you know, snowballs and snowflakes over there,
lumber.
which is still a contentious issue, and they are dealing with tariffs from the United States on that right now. So what do you do to try and get a deal in the next few weeks if you believe the Trump administration wants the deal?
Look, I think Canada is in a real bind, and that's very unfortunate, because Canada is a neighbor and a great ally, but they are being jammed. So the idea is, if you don't sign by Friday, you're out.
But isn't that a great negotiating strategy if you're the Trump administration?
That's what it is. It's a gun to their head. It's basically jamming them, and now Canada needs to make a decision. Do they get the deal they want from now until Friday? And if they don't, are they willing to walk away? Is Prime Minister Trudeau willing to walk away and say no? I think that is a big leadership decision that he has in front of him.
Indeed it is, and I can tell you, while he might get some political mileage out of it, the economy would suffer greatly. Carlos Gutierrez, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
You're welcome back anytime, by the way, as this whole thing rolls on.